In today's episode, we are thrilled to have Dr. Sandra Kaufmann back with us. Not just a renowned physician and aging researcher, Dr. Kaufmann is also the pioneering mind behind the Kaufmann Protocol, a science-based approach that's transforming how we understand and tackle aging. In today's show, we focus on the four most essential and complex organ systems: the bone, brain, gut, and skin. Dr. Kaufmann will share her insights on these systems and discuss the crucial supplements that could give us an edge in the battle against aging, and of course, practical tips that anyone can incorporate into their daily routines to promote healthier, longer lives. So sit back and enjoy up as we navigate the fascinating intersection of biology, chemistry, time, and lifestyle, armed with Dr. Kaufmann's expert guidance on this week's episode of the Crackin Backs.
Alrighty, so we got Dr. Sandra Kaufmann back. So, welcome back to part 2 about fighting the aging process and allowing us to grow old and kick some ass. You know, we all know that aging is a fact of life. However, being old is a mindset. So, we're going to talk about facts and solutions today. And in your latest book, Aging Solutions, you break down the 4 most common or talked about organ solutions or organ systems. So let's break those down: bone, brain, gut, and skin. And only because my partner is into a little bit of muscle stuff, we'll throw one little muscle thing in there because, you know, he doesn't realize all I have to do is lift weights and build muscle. But we'll talk about that. So, Doc, let's talk about bone. And take us through the changes that happen, starting maybe in your 30s.
All right, so we're going to back off a little bit, and I'm going to ignore your question and just talk about what I think is important about bone.
As you should, because you know what? I've been married for 27 years, and women have been ignoring my question my whole life. So,
okay, all right, so here's the primer on bone, and then you guys already know most of this, but I'll just state the obvious so we're all on the same page. So, bone, you have several types of cells in your bone. It's a very active living tissue. So you have osteoblasts that build bone and osteoclasts that break bone down. When you are young, your bone turns over significantly, which is why you break your arm when you fall off the monkey bars as a kid. Within several weeks, it's pretty much healed. Same fracture in one of us old folks is going to take a little bit longer because the process of turning over is just slower. The other thing that happens as you get older is the bone sort of rearranges a bit. It gets thicker on the outside, thinner on the inside, and a variety of other things occur. But most importantly, the more inflamed you are, inflammation activates osteoclasts, which break your bone down, and osteoblasts, the one that build bone, gets a little bit lazy. So as you get older and older and older, your bone becomes more brittle. It doesn't heal very well. Of course, we become osteopenic. In addition, collagen gets laid down in your bone, which is fantastic because it helps us maintain integrity and stretchiness of bone, but it also it gets attacked by AGEs, advanced glycation end products, which makes it quite frail over the course of time. So sometimes instead of bending like it's supposed to, it just snaps. So all of those things put together explains why older people have more problems with their bone, why they break them more, why they don't heal them as well, and why you get shorter over the course of time as the bone in your vertebrae sort of disintegrates. So there you go, the depressing bone story.
No, I think Spencer getting shorter is a depressing bone story.
Heavy squats.
So we talk about Wolff's Law. We like laws, and bone builds bone under stress. Does that continue, or is it just a slower down?
So everything slows down, and yes, it does. Bone does build bone, and you do want resistance training and compression because that stimulates osteoblastic activity. I think as you get older, there's a realization that you have to know when is when. We see a lot of people that are ancient, and what happens is when they do their heavy squats, not you, Spencer, but as people do get older, or they go, I haven't exercised my entire life, but now I'm going to do heavy squats. Well, dumbass, right? They break their bones, they become kyphotic, and they rupture their discs, and they go, well, I thought lifting weights was good for me. And the answer is, everything in reasonable moderation, and you got to titrate it to who you are and when you are. So I'm not personally a huge fan of putting a shit ton of weight on your back and doing squats because I think you're going to rupture your you're going to rupture your discs and then sort of compress your bones. But a bit of it is obviously very good, right? Because we do want resistance and tension training, compressive training.
So instead of, you know, like most doctors, they'll refer you to taking, you know, Fosamax or any of those other bone density increasing medications. What are you suggesting, and what you've put in your book? Could you share that?
Oh, absolutely. So big grandiose statement. All cells are roughly the same, as I've said in book one, right? So you have to maximize all aspects of cellular aging, regardless of whether you're aiming this at a bone cell or a brain cell or a liver cell. So I'll stand by the fact that you need to optimize all cells sort of equally based on stuff we sort of talked about in the past. When it comes specifically to bone, you can break it down into sort of the things that I talked about. So osteoclasts that break down bone get activated by inflammation. So if you can sort of harness your inflammatory factors, you will decrease the rate of bone loss. So that's step one. Step two is to increase your osteoblastic activity, and they're absolutely over-the-counter agents to do that. And I know you're going to ask me what they are, so I have my list ready. But it's a balance, right? So decrease the loss, increase the production, maximize the collagen, decrease the AGEs. I mean, that's sort of the soup to nuts bone strategy. All right, so best osteoblastic activator that we know of is something called naringenin. Mostly it comes from Drineria, but it also comes from citrus. It's in the rind, which tastes terrible, so I prefer mine in pill form, classically, right? It is a polyflavonoid, so it does the standard polyflavonoid type stuff. It's a free radical scavenger. It activates your NRF2. It's a SIRT1 activator, blah, blah, blah. But it is the best thing that we have, theoretically, to increase osteoblastic activity. So I always tell women when they become osteopenic, pop your naringenin. And it just seems to really do a world of good.
Love that. I love when you give little recipes for people, because that's...
Right, so a bone recipe, right? You want your naringenin. You want to decrease your inflammatory issues with, my favorite, of course, is curcumin. There's a few others that you can use. Astaxanthin, of course, is one of my favorites. We worry about collagen. So I tell people over the age of 40, you should take collagen, right? And collagen, it doesn't, you know, there's the whole fancy, is it marine, is it land collagen, whatever, it doesn't really flippin' matter, right? Because when you eat it, true, like everyone's so fancy about it, but it doesn't really matter. In fact, I actually recommend Jello shots. Right? It's the same stuff, and it tastes way better, and it's so much more fun. It's true.
It's awesome.
Right? Come on, you guys like your good Jello shot, right?
Oh yeah, everyone's...
Oh, hell yeah.
You knew you'd appreciate that.
Yep. If
But when you eat...
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but when you eat the collagen, it goes to your digestive system. You break it up into diantripeptides anyway. Those go to your fibroblasts that say, aha, let's make more collagen, and then you do, and then you're great. So it actually totally works out.
If you go into my cabinet, and there's this big rack of vitamins and everything, and supplements and all. I mean, your name is all over. I mean, the collagen I started taking since our first program, and I emailed you. You gave me the little list, and I went, "Oh, this is fantastic." I've been taking it ever since. But a quick question though, I'm wondering, do you cycle these supplements, or do you take them perennially? I mean, what do you suggest for people?
So excellent question. So I kind of do sort of different emotional categories, right? And they do. Like, I have a love-hate relationship with some of these because you go,
Not the Jello shots, though.
Oh God, no. That's a perennial.
That's
No, but there are things that you do in fact need to take every day, come hell or high water, right? And then there's some things that you can take, 4 days a week. There are some things that you can take for weeks at a time and then stop them for weeks at a time. And it sort of depends on what they're doing, what their solubilities are, what their mode of excretion is, blah, 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 blah. So as an example, like carnosine, I always tell people to take carnosine, right? Because it's a great transglycosylator. But you have carnosine in your body. So you have natural enzymes to get rid of carnosine, right? You have carnosine ACE. So the more carnosine you take, the more carnosine ACE you make, and then it's a negative circle, so then you end up with less carnosine in the first place. So if you cycle off of carnosine, your enzyme levels drop, and then you can start back again, and you get more bang for your buck. So things that have natural ways of metabolizing themselves should be cycled. Things that your body can't, like astaxanthin, right? It sits there 24-hour dosing. Nothing happens. Like you don't make it, you don't metabolize it faster or slower. You just do it. And I think that's one of those, you must do it every damn days. I do cycle my sirtuin activators. I've decided my big kick this year has been all the specific sirtuins, right? I was obsessed with 1. Now I'm absolutely obsessed with 3 and 6. And they're very different. They're localized differently in your cells. They're activated by different things. And I think it's absolutely crucial to sort of make sure all of those things are activated, but you have to do them, full blown every day. So 1 gets activated every day, and 3 and 6 I sort of go back and forth with.
So
you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, listen, anybody who
trying to
enjoyed
formulate a question, he has no idea what I'm talking about.
anybody who enjoyed listening to the Krebs cycle during college or university and found themselves having an orgasm, you need to read the book. Because your book, I have to read sections multiple times. I'm going, oh my gosh, I haven't heard this word since chiropractic college. But it's so well done and so referenced that it makes it just that much more.
I think that was like the worst sales pitch for my book I've ever heard.
All right, you could always skip to the glossary. And
there you go.
I actually did that to really, okay, this is what I need to take. This is good.
Here's Spencer, going over the Krebs cycle. I'm still stuck on Gel shot. So,
That's a hell of a lot more enjoyable for you. But
well, you're going to be so excited because I was looking through things to sort of get you guys excited about, and I was looking at alpha ketoglutarate, and it is like, it's right there in the Krebs cycle for you, and I was all excited for you. But now I'm going to bore you to death, so like I'll leave the Krebs cycle out.
I wish you were our teacher. It would never get boring in the biochemistry, right?
No. I actually might like chemistry and micro whatever if I listen with our teacher.
So, but let me understand. Let me back up a little bit. Okay, so there's those supplements that you would determine that are not necessary to take perennially or every day, and then there's one like. Would there be ones that you would identify in lab work and doing blood tests that you would go, okay, I've reached my levels, and then maybe back off, or is that another way of getting feedback?
So the answer is yes and no. Some things we just don't have the capacity to measure right now, and some things we do, right? The easy stuff that we can measure, for example, I use a lot of magnesium threonate, right? It's a great brain activator. So there's some things you want to measure and some things that can't necessarily measure at this moment. But so D is an easy one, right? D, you need to supplement until you have high mid levels. There's no way of knowing that unless you measure it, but there's no good thing about having extra, right? So I don't really talk about D a whole lot because it's just one of those things that you need, but it doesn't really do anything in excess. There you go. Magnesium threonate, however, falls into a different category, right? So magnesium threonate is one of the amazing things about brain. We haven't gotten to brain yet, but it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it increases plasticity in your hippocampal neurons, right? So it can actually help make you smarter, which is astounding. But you have to know what someone's magnesium level is because you don't want to overdo it, right? Because too much magnesium will sort of muck up your muscles and make you sort of like jellyfishy. So assuming someone's magnesium is reasonably normal, then you can sort of max out and help their brain. So I think that's kind of cool. So those things you sort of want to measure. Other things you have to take at face value. So for example, unless you're in a lab study, there's no way of measuring your sirtuins. And I think that someday there will be, but at the moment there are not. So there's no way of knowing if your sirtuin 3 level in your mitochondria is elevated or not. There's no way of knowing it. But life has actually come significantly farther. When I started doing this, you couldn't measure your interleukins. And I was just looking at Quest Diagnostics, the list of what you can measure these days, and you can measure like 17 different interleukins. So in fact, those are fantastic things to trace, right? In the old days you can measure your CRP levels, right? The HSCRP. But you have to say, well, that's a very non-specific inflammatory factor. Now you can go through all of your interleukins and say, this one's high, this one's low, blah, 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 and adjust your protocol accordingly. So there's some things we can measure and some things that we can't.
You mentioned sirtuins. One, what was it? 1, 2, and 3, or 1 and 3 and 4?
So there's 7 of them. Sirtuin 1, right? Everything that's always like that we know the most about is 1. So it's easy to remember because it came first, or at least we found it first because it was the most obvious, right? 1. So 1 controls most of your cellular homeostasis, right? 1, 6, and 7 live in your nucleus. 6 is associated with your chromatin, and it helps control DNA repair mechanisms and telomeres and all that kind of stuff. 3, 4, and 5 live in your mitochondria and control your energy production. 3 is like the headmaster guy. So 2 and 3 starts dropping by the time you're 30, 35. So that's a huge energy problem. And then 2 sort of flits around the cell, and I don't really know what it does. Clearly not a whole lot of important stuff with aging. But so 1, 3, and 6 are like the winners, and we just can't measure those in standard people yet.
What are you taking to stimulate 1, 3, and 6? Or you were mentioning
Right.
earlier to keep those elevated or keep those...
So 1, the big ones are pterodstilbene and resveratrol. And Campfera paraflora, which they actually sell as Certmax, which I think is kind of funny. So those are the big 3 for 1, and they do a bunch of the other sirtuins too. So it's not all 1, but they're basics because they're all histone deacetylase enzymes. 3 is really sort of interesting. So the big ones here are dihydromyricetin and hinochiol. Sort of random things. What I think is insanely cool about dihydromyricetin, and I don't know if I'm spewing out a word that you've never heard before, but if you Google it, it's sold as a hangover repair mechanism, right? And it's really interesting. So when you drink and you have a hangover, you've just devastated your mitochondria in your liver. So by causing them to sort of like get reactivated, your hangover's better.
So
right?
after the Jello shots, you get the collagen.
Yes.
And then I see where you're going.
You see where you're going with this, right?
I'm liking this.
You take your bad habits and
write
you
this
like
down.
you don't fix them, but you like strategize against them.
There you go. There you go. So, talking about brain, you know, what are you suggesting for dementia and Alzheimer's, and keeping those areas of the brain stable, somewhat stable, or minimized?
Right. So the brain is really an amazing organ, as we all know, but it uses like a quarter of all the oxygen in our bodies. So it's set up for oxidative stress, which is a problem. It uses a quarter of all the glucose, right, which is a setup then for glycation issues. It is protected by your blood-brain barrier. So the free radical scavenging capacity in your brain sucks, to be honest. The endogenous capacities are very, very low. And at the same time, the biggest problem with neurologic diseases is that proteins become unfolded and then they sort of stick together. So protein folding and unfolding is in my quality control category, and it has to do with chaperones and the UPS system and blah, blah, blah. So one of the things we want to do is sort of upregulate your heat shock proteins and your chaperone proteins and blah, blah, blah. But so what can we do to help your brain? So number one, we want to reduce oxidative stress. Right? So oxidative stress is a huge problem, and it's especially a problem in the brain because oxidative stress to lipids becomes peroxidation, and most of your brain is lipids, right? So over time, your brain just sort of gets oxidized and melts away, and that's sort of a really bad thing. Glucose, monster problem, so we want to upregulate the ability to have endogenous free radical scavengers. And we have a lot of those that float around the body. The key is taking some that get through the blood-brain barrier, right? You got to get through the defense tactics. So we want to do that. We want to upregulate our chaperones. And then we want to increase neuroplastic capacity, right? Because as we get older over time, cell turnover changes. And we want to increase all of the things that make our hippocampus, especially because that's where memory is, work better, right? So it sounds depressing, and you guys are like, oh, shit. Because you've got the whole head nogging thing going, like, oh, crap.
Well, that's Spencer because he's already older than me, so I still.
No,
That's true. That's crucial.
No, my head,
Yeah.
Bobby is the Parkinson's that's coming up. No, joke. But we'll get to that question in a moment. No.
No, it's really funny because I'm thinking, oh my God, I've just hit like the boredom threshold.
No, not at all. No.
Like I'm such a geek. I'm so sorry.
No. Actually, what I was going to ask you is, what are you referring to as those chaperones that would provide free radical scavenging through the blood-brain barrier?
So you just put like 3 things in the wrong category. So all protein. So if you let's back up.
I'll go back to the head bobbing. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. So let's go. So do you know what chaperones are? Do you want me to give you the primer here?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
this is the system is just a fantastic system. Your cells, right, make proteins. That's what they do. Every cell is a protein factory. And the protein can be anything. It can be a hormone. It can be a this. It can be a that. Like each cell has a capacity to make like 2,000 different proteins, right? But they specialize. It makes insulin. It makes growth factor. It makes this. It makes that. Whatever. So if you think about your little cell and it's making these proteins, proteins work by 3-dimensional structure. Okay, so it's coded in your DNA with a linear structure, and then it sort of self-folds into a secondary structure, and then folds again into a tertiary structure. So now you have a very complex 3-dimensional protein, and if it loses that 3-dimensionality, it doesn't work anymore. Right? Then if you take several of them and stick them together, then it's like a quaternary structure. But the tertiary structure, the 3D dimension of this thing is extraordinarily important. Again, if it just slides a little bit, it doesn't work anymore, right? And if it doesn't work anymore, several things happen. So number one, you just wasted a ton of energy making this thing that doesn't work, right? And then proteins that are misfolded do several things as well. They stick together. They tend to cluster, and that's what happens in a lot of neurologic diseases. Additionally, when pieces are exposed that shouldn't be exposed to the cytoplasm, you get an autoimmune response, and that sometimes can precipitate a lot of autoimmune diseases as you get older. So keeping your proteins in their 3-dimensional structure is crucial to the way things work, right? Some people refer to it as proteostasis, which is fine, right? Proteins have to remain the way they are. So cells have invested a ton of energy into this. So for every big protein that you make, the cell makes a babysitter protein. Literally, right? The babysitter protein, I'm sure it's kind of like having a nanny. It follows it around everywhere, and when the protein gets out of line, it fixes it, sort of whacks it around, right? So when the protein is made, the chaperone takes it, makes sure it's in its 3-dimensional configuration, and it follows it all over the cell. And so it's really cool. So if you take one that's actually going to go into the mitochondria to do something, it's extraordinarily complex. So the cytoplasm, or like in the nucleus, it makes it cytoplasm, it gets folded, right? The chaperone then carries it to the mitochondria where it unfolds, threads it through a protein into the mitochondria, and then a second set of chaperones refold it, follow it around to get it to where it needs to go. And at any time it misbehaves, then the chaperone either refolds it or says, oh shit, this is not fixable, labels it with ubiquitization, and then it takes it to the disposal unit where then the protein gets eradicated, right? So there's a huge chaperone system to make sure all of your proteins are going the way they are, but they fail over time, right? And that's what happens in your brain, because you get misfolded proteins that cluster, and then you get Lewy bodies or these bodies or those bodies that we all have learned about in med school. The question was always like, well, why the fuck is there this glob sitting in the cell? Well, it's a cluster of proteins that's stuck together. So then how do you upregulate chaperones? And the good news is there's a variety of things that can do that. So it was really long-winded, I apologize.
No. So is this what happens, this leaky gut, where proteins slip through and your immune system attacks it because it doesn't identify it? Does that have anything to do with it?
You know what I love about you, Spencer, is you take some strand of something and change the subject entirely, which is impressive.
Yes, it keeps me out of trouble.
Yeah. So leaky gut is entirely different. So the gut.
I love her.
Well, I'm trying to grasp every fragment of what I might understand and then translate it for our audience, because
No, that makes sense.
Short of drool coming out of my mouth.
The proteins that your cells make, okay, your cells, be it your kidney cell, your brain cell, your liver cell, those are the proteins that get protected by your chaperones. Okay? Proteins that are getting absorbed from your gut are not your proteins, right? Those are from either from something you ate, or they're a metabolite of the bugs in your gut, right? Proteins that your body wants to bring in, they get broken down into polypeptides or single peptides or amino acids, whatever, and they do go through your guts, they get absorbed into your system, and then they go wherever they need to go. right? But those are exogenous proteins, and these are your endogenous proteins.
Much better. Okay.
Mm.
Now I'm speaking for the rest of the people that are listening. All right. Switch gears from dementia, Alzheimer's. How about those that are athletic that want to maintain a sharp sense of response time and more fluid movement and how the brain communicates with the rest of the body? Is there any other suggestions that as we age to maintain that level of cognitive processing?
Oh, 1,000%. So what's really cool is the muscle and the brain are very connected. There's a whole book, and I forgot who wrote it. It's like the mind-muscle connection, and it has to do with like how your muscle puts out myokinins, and it goes to your brain, and it triggers brain health, and blah blah blah, and vice versa. So it's a very important connection. Um, so in terms of keeping your brain healthy, we worry about free radical scavenging and oxidation. Assuming you do all of that, and assuming you don't have a huge genetic predisposition to take a dive, your brain should be okay as long as you're proactive in helping it. And people always talk about, okay, doing little brain exercises and puzzles and all that. And what that does is just, it keeps the blood flowing to the areas of your brain to process information, right? It's the use it or lose it thing, like all over your body, right? Be it whatever piece of info or piece of body you're talking about, blood flow there keeps things moving, and it keeps you either sharp or strong or whatever it is. So anything that you can do for your brain is obviously very useful. In terms of your exercise ability, then you're talking about different systems. You got your cardiovascular system, you've got your muscle, you got your tendons, you got your ligaments, you got your joints, blah, blah, blah. And the question is what in any one given person seems to be the right limiting factor, right? Is it joints? This is what I hear about all the time. People have significant joint pain with age. It's osteoarthritis, it's loss of fluid in their joints, blah, blah, blah. Can we fix that? Yeah, we can. We can fix that, right? So depending on what someone's specific etiology is, you sort of direct a protocol to fix that.
Controlling inflammation.
Inflammation is a huge, absolutely huge one. So on the list of things you said, what do I take every day that it's absolutely mandatory? I take a ton of metacurcumin because it's a huge anti-inflammatory. When I don't take it after 3 days, I hurt everywhere. So I just know this stuff works. I take, it's one of my...
Metacurcumin?
So curcumin, right? So curcumin comes from turmeric, right?
Yeah.
Turmeric only has, if you ground it up 1 to 5%, depending on your species, is going to be curcumin. And then regular curcumin, the half-life or the bioavailability is absolutely terrible. So there's been an ever-escalating war of how you can make curcumin better, right? And this war has been raging for 15 years, and the good news is that we all win, right? Because every time they come up with a new version, you go, yes! It started out with adding pepper, right? Some people have been taking that still. That's 15-year-old technology. Now it's in nanomycels and microsomes. So the one I happen to take is it's sort of microencapsulated, and it increases the bioavailability. And they just call it metacurcumin. I don't know if it really matters. And I'm also experimenting with tetrahydrocurcumin, which is one of the metabolites that's supposed to have some better characteristics. But the idea is get the inflammation down.
I had a patient come in last year and they were showing me that they're taking curcumin, and I go, that's great. Well, what brand, oh no, I went to the Indian food store and I got a bag of curcumin or turmeric real cheap, and I went, oh. Well, I don't know if that's what it was intended for, but so clarified. So metacurcumin would be that.
Well, there's a bunch of them. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to tag for any particular brand or anything, but
Right.
as long as it's bioavailable, that's the key.
Okay.
And there's lots of them. In fact, one of the things I was going to tout today was fisetin. One of my new big favorites, and it is incredibly good at anti-inflammatory issues, and it's an MMP inhibitor, on top of being an anti-senescent and increasing autophagy, and increasing your glow enzymes. It's one of my new pets that I just absolutely adore.
Fisetin. Fisetin, I believe it is.
Yeah, it's feisty, man. He's good.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
There you go.
Just so you know, I did read. I have been reading. And the highlighting is where, I just get stupid and I have to read it 5 times. But anyway. All right.
If
So
it makes you feel any better, I actually do the same damn thing because
okay.
27 ages later, they're all like, you know,
Yeah, I
they get this stuff.
All right. So you actually, I'm going to do the rapid fire questions right now because, this is always the fun part.
Look at her.
I feel like I should stretch first or something. Okay.
Put your seatbelt on. We're ready.
All right.
Rapid fire questions. Now, you actually alluded to the first one, the answer to it, but it may be some others. So what is your favorite supplement that you are suggesting that may be in your new book?
It's so tough. I have to say my 2 top. Well, oh my God. See, that's not. It's like picking your favorite child, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking that same thing. This is
Right?
like
And I
my
have to
favorite
say
child.
it's like day dependent. Like I have to say sometimes I'm leaning in towards spermidine, right?
Right.
And then sometimes like, oh my God, fisetin has to be my favorite. But then I go, lactoferrin.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. Now, tell us just real quick about lactoferrin.
So lactoferrin is this fantastic molecule. Lacto is milk, ferrin is iron, right? So generally speaking, most of it comes from breast milk, either yours or cows or camels or whatever. And it's meant to carry iron around the body. However, there is an AGE, an advanced glycation end product binding site, right? It's interesting. It's called the ABCD motif, and there's 2 of them because it looks like a little bow tie molecule. So you get two of something every time it does anything. 2 irons, 2 AGEs. So if you take exogenous lactoferrin, it actually binds to the AGEs, and then you excrete them. So I like to think of it as an AGE sponge, which is just incredibly cool. The other thing it does is it is part of the inflammatory cascade, okay? Which you go, oh shit, why am I doing that? The answer is it's the off switch, right? So if you have your own endogenous inflammation going on, by the time the lactoferrin gets released, it's the signal to turn off your inflammatory process. So by taking exogenous lactoferrin, you are essentially turning off unnecessary inflammation. So it's a twofer. So you get to lose AGEs and you decrease inflammation. The caveat to that is if you're taking it, tell your primary care physician because they're going to draw your labs and think, oh my God, you're about to die, right? Because it looks really bad. You're like so inflamed. But that's why.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that because I do my lab work
Yeah.
every 6 months or so, and I check for things. All right, so that was beautiful. Number 2, thoughts on testosterone therapy for women.
I'm actually not a huge fan. I think that, well, let me back up. I think that longevity comes in layers, right? And I think that my thought process has always been, let's fix your cells. I am a cell biologist by training. So I think that if you can optimize your cells and you start at a reasonably early age, your cells will do exactly what they are supposed to do, and it'll lock you into a metabolism late 30s, early 40s. Because that's where you should be, right?
Good.
If you do that, all of your hormone levels should maintain themselves at a very high level, right? If you do not do that, and this drives me nuts, people go into like these sort of pseudo longevity clinics and they immediately dump 1,000 hormones on them, and I just think that's the wrong approach. Once you optimize your cells, then you get things measured, and if they're not reasonable, then you supplement. But I hate people that jump to supplementation early. And of course, women do have low levels of testosterone that are going to fail over time. Everything fails over time. But do you jump to that first? I think that's a really bad idea.
Right. And we know here in South Florida, those anti-aging clinics are popping up all over the place, injecting, hormones and so on.
Oh, it's criminal. Yeah. In fact, I'm actually in talks with someone right now to open up a real longevity clinic. So hopefully next time I'm on, I will be able to give you good news about that.
Great. All right. Speaking of clinics and places opening up around here in California and so on, drip hydration centers or those IV nutrition centers, scam or valid?
A little bit of both.
Depends
I
on
think
who it
that
is.
I think that 70% of it is scam. I think that people think it's sexy. I think it's, I put IVs in people every day, so for me, it's not sexy, it's a pain in the ass. But I think they feel proactive. But if you look at the list of things that they're selling, like, a bottle of LR, which is nothing essentially, is $100, $150, it's crazy. They throw in some glutathione, some vitamin C, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, you can take all of that orally and it's absolutely fine. The only thing that may be practical, maybe, but not necessary, are the NAD. Depending on how old you are, it wouldn't necessarily be bad to get an NAD infusion and then transfer over to PO therapy. Only because, I mean, if you're in your 40s, then oral supplementation is going to take maybe 10 days or so to get to normal levels. If you're in your 60s or your 70s, you're extremely deficient, right? It just goes down over time, usually, statistically anyway. So, perhaps bolusing that IV and then moving on to an oral supplementation program would not necessarily be a bad thing to do. I'm actually working on, and you're going to laugh, for the clinic that we're working on, I may actually convert the Panacea into an IV system to get people jump started, but it would be significantly different than anyone else's IV therapy because it would be sirtuin activation and free radical scavenging and the nicotinamide and transglycosylating agents and all of the things that you really do need, but they really can't do it at these Chizo IV therapy places. It would be like actual real longevity medicine.
Chizo. Okay. Yeah. Now you do, just for two references here. You for those of you who wonder what Dr. Kaufmann does, she is by trade an established pediatric anesthesiologist and understands chemistry like no one else. So that's why, when you mentioned something about IVs, or you mentioned something just a moment ago that you do it every day, that's
right. I don't mean to sound like I'm a junkie. I guess that sounded bad, right?
Well, I wanted to be clear that you weren't, tripping right now. So, okay.
You don't know that, actually.
That's true. The Jello shot. Back to the Jello shot.
I see a Jello shot in the back.
So you'll laugh. I actually do I put an IV, well, I try to put an IV in myself, and I frequently fail, but one of my colleagues will do it. Because I've actually decided that once a month, everyone should have exosome infusions.
Exosome? You want to share what an exosome is?
Ooh, what's an exosome? So everyone, I hope, we'll start with basic information. Stem cells. All of our bodies are covered in stem cells that are able to make other cells as we need them. A stem cell then becomes a progenitor cell and blah, 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 blah. As you get older, your stem cells are less healthy, less able to do things, less able to replicate successfully, blah, 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 blah. But the other thing stem cells do is they actually exude growth factors and anti-inflammatory factors and all these really wonderful, healthy things, which, again, as you get older, your stem cells just cannot do. So people do several things. You can either go and get a stem cell infusion from placental stem cells, and you leave the country to do that. They do it in Mexico, Panama, the islands, etc., and it's ridiculously expensive. I think it's $20,000-$30,000. I could be wrong, but that's what it used to be. It's very expensive. Or you can bank your own stem cells, and this is kind of this new thing that's kind of cool. You can take your own fat, which is better than your bone marrow, your fat stem cells, bank them, and then have them reinfused to you over the course of 10 years or so. You can do I think they said 3 infusions for up to 10 years off the same batch. So that's a fantastic thing to do, and it's not that expensive, by correlation. However, the other thing you can do, which is even easier, is you can just use the exosomes that a stem cell would exude. And there are many companies in this country and around the world that have a bank of mesenchymal placental stem cells, and they just farm the exosomes and they will sell them to you. So I actually have a freezer full of exosomes. They are fantastic. So it's just, it's cytokinins, it's microRNAs, it's all the growth factors that you need. So I have this theory that I use small doses every month to sort of create a homeostasis aspect of, goodness, I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because people are going to start hearing about this new multi-level marketing company. I'm not going to mention because I'm not here to promote it, but I've already been hit up by it. And it's a patch that stimulates stem cells. Now, I looked up the literature. There is no literature on a patch that can stimulate stem cells. There's no double-blind trials or anything like that. So, just putting it out there that
Right,
you're actually going to hear.
So let me actually add to that.
Okay.
It may not be the best idea to stimulate your own stem cells all the time. Stem cells, you need to preserve them, right? There is a limited number of times that a stem cell can divide. Now, of course, it overcomes the Hayflick limit through telomerase, but as your stem cell, gets hit by oxidative damage and glycation damage, the telomeres get shorter faster than you can make them longer with telomerase, okay? So I don't necessarily know, and again, there's no science behind this, it's theoretical at this point. Is it a good idea to force your stem cells to be more active all the time? I think you might do better in the short term, but not so great in the long term, right? Therefore, if you want your own stem cells, it seems more reasonable to take them out of you, grow them, bathe them, and then give them back to yourself, right? Because that's kind of the same thing in a better environment. And the reason that stem cells and all telomeres are sort of like taking a hit is because the DNA is double-stranded. All right, now I'm going to really geek out here. DNA is double-stranded, but there's a tail that's single-stranded, right? And it's TAGGG. So 50% of your telomeres are guanine, right? TACG. I don't know if you guys remember any of that. Guanine gets more oxidized than any other nucleotide, and it gets more glycosylated than any other nucleotide. Okay? So your telomeres are set up for oxidative and glycative damage like no tomorrow. You have 100,000 oxidative hits in your telomeres every day, every cell. And you have to fix that. And if you don't, you have telomere damage. So not all telomere damage has to do with replicative stress. It just takes a lot of hits. So as far as I'm concerned, you want to protect your stem cells as much as is humanly possible and preserve them for when you're 100 and 120. Using them all up today may not be the best strategy.
So farming your own stem cells using your fat, are there companies that do? You don't have to mention
There
names.
absolutely are. So there's a company actually down here in Sunrise in Florida, because that's where we are. That's where I am.
Yep.
Yeah, you take 20 cc's of your fat out, right? You may not have 20 cc's of fat, but you take somewhat, right? You just dig around, find it somewhere, right? You send it to this company, and they plate it out and put it in a nice, warm, happy bath, and they play pleasant music and say nice things to your cells. And then when you want them back, you place an order, and then they sort of farm out whatever you need, and then you can infuse it back to yourself. So they're your own cells. So I think it's sort of like a fantastic, safe alternative. And barring that, you stick with exosomes. Or maybe we come up with a program where we use both.
I can't wait till you open up that clinic.
So we're going to do all of these things in this clinic. And this is why I think it's important to do this, because I'm sick and tired of all of these longevity places. They're just crap. It's all hormones. It's all IV shit. No one does actually real science-based longevity medicine. And I think it's time that we do. And I think I finally found an appropriate partner and venue and financing. So we're working through the stuff. But that's the stuff we're going to offer, right? Because I think of longevity in terms of a pyramid. Like there's stuff you have to do every day. There's stuff that you need to do every month. There's stuff you have to do every few times a year and blah, 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 blah. But someone has to create those programs and kind of make people stick to them.
I think I'm going to be coming down to Florida for you. Maybe I'll see.
What about me?
Maybe I'll see Spencer. But you know what? We're going to hang out, do some gel shots, get younger, and then we'll go
See?
to the big guy.
And then I'll finally show you the Key Biscayne Bridge, the highest elevation in South Florida.
Yes.
Right.
I'm in.
And then Dr. Kaufmann will take you wall climbing, the rock
Yes.
climbing wall there.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Oh, when she comes to California, I'll take her to
a real rock,
rocks.
a real mountain.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so we totally went off the rapid
Seriously,
fire.
you told me what you guys want to talk about, and I sat here and I pulled all this information. And I'm like, you guys stump me. I'm like, so, but we didn't talk about any of it, which is
No,
totally.
I love it though.
I love this
You know what I
stuff.
love?
I love this
I
stuff.
love when she goes blah blah blah, because blah 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 gives me a chance to catch up on the words that she said earlier.
You know, and blah 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 is the only thing I understand.
I don't even know why you guys talk to me because I feel I could probably just have you go blah 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 blah. Facial expressions and be like, okay.
I'm good.
All right. Is blah 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 available in your vitamin shop?
So you need 1,000 milligrams a day of blah blah blah.
See, now you're speaking my language.
Oh man, that's great. All right, back to my rapid fire.
Okay.
All right,
It's
so
so rapid. Go ahead.
question number 4 is
Yeah.
your favorite de-stress activity that anyone else could do. I know that rock climbing or rock wall climbing is one of your things, but what else? Technique. Any
So rock
meditation?
climbing would be number 1. Swimming is number 2.
All right.
I'm a big lap swimmer. I put my music on. I swim usually in the evenings when there's no one at the pool, and I just feel like I'm flying.
You have music like
So,
headphones?
so I have a water pod.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and you put on whatever kind of music is de-stressing, something fast, something slow, something orchestral, whatever, and you just cruise.
Very good. That's
Although I
all
tend to,
joints.
you'll laugh at this. It's a big pool and it doesn't have the floaty separators.
Yeah.
It's an Olympic-sized pool. It just doesn't have the floaty separators. And I tend to swim with my eyes closed frequently. So I'm the world's worst lap swimmer because I tend to go diagonally.
Right.
So no one wants to ever swim in the pool with me, which I'm totally good with because I find it horribly annoying.
Oh no, that's so funny. All right, question 5 and the last one. Have you ever tried snake oil? Now I know snake oil has bad connotations, but there is this new thing that, well, it's actually I've heard about snake venom as a painkiller. But are you familiar with any kind of the snake oil that?
If you read her book, it's in the first.
I was going to say, real snake oil from the Chinese tradition actually was beneficial.
Snake
And yeah, it was the omegas something. I don't remember the details now, but because I remember looking that up, going, I keep using this word snake oil. There's got to be some truth to it. And then it turns out when the Chinese came to the U.S., they're like, oh, snake oil, and they just started macerating, chopping up American snakes that didn't have the same formulation, and so it didn't do anything, so it became kind of a crock. But real snake oil is actually supposed to be beneficial, but no, I haven't tried it. I do like snail product, though, if that's close. Snail mucin.
Wait a minute, tell me about.
Yeah, I don't think snails and snakes are very close.
They swarm around on the ground, maybe? Like there's...
They're bottom dwellers. Very nice.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. I'm sure people are just as afraid of a snail as they are a snake.
Come on, there's snail phobia. It's like a huge problem.
Somebody needs therapy.
All right. Well, I'm going to try and get Spencer back on track. So, he brought up a concept that you kind of slammed him on in that blood gut barrier. He was a little he's a little premature on that one. So, but let's go back to that gut. We had the brain fog, gut barrier, controller of the immune system. The gut's a big deal, and I think a lot of people got their gut out of whack in the last couple of years. What's a good way to get their gut back in back in whack?
Right, so excellent question, and you're right. I did slam Spencer, and I should not have done that. But so the gut is a very complicated thing, right? There's more surface area on the gut than anywhere else. So this is actually the main area where you interact with the outside world. And there are more bacteria in you than cells on you. So the bugs that live in your gut and what they metabolize and how it gets into you is incredibly important. I mean, it's just, it cannot be understated at all or overstated at all. And of course, the junction between what's out of you and what's in you are the barriers between or the enterocytes. And that fails over time, which is why people do get like what they call leaky gut. Just bad toxins come into your system and they're recognized as foreign, and it's a whole, immune process and blah, 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 blah. But that's a little bit different than see, I it's a little bit different than, so like your entire GI system ages over time, right? Because it's muscle that fails, it's neurologic system that fails, it's your immune system that fails. So there's a whole host of things that go on with your gut, which is why I made it one of the big four, because people will say, well, you know what, I don't want to age, but this is my big problem. And these were the four big problems that popped up for the most part. I mean, obviously other people have other concerns, but these were like the big four, which is why I stuck it in there. Depending on exactly who you are, what your gut issue is, there's lots of different answers. My favorite, easiest answer to gut issues is aloe vera, which is incredibly inexpensive, tested over time. And what's interesting is it has so many things in it, and honestly, just don't eat it off the plant because it's disgusting. I tried licking it once and wanted to shoot myself, but it comes in capsules and you can't taste it. And so it actually, to a certain degree, it helps you sort of like, not be constipated, which is nice, but it breaks down to in a variety of things, one of which is butyrate, which actually helps your enterocytes be healthier, which is incredibly nice, right? One of the things that a fiber diet does is it releases certain PUFAs, and this is one of those PUFAs. Additionally, aloe helps all over your body, and especially with your skin and your general health. So that is my cheapest, easiest GI answer.
Love it. So, you know what sucks? We need to wrap it up, and I just want to ask one more thing.
Bring it on.
You ready? Multi-layered birthday cake. Talk to us about it.
Yes! It's your birthday suit. It's your birthday suit, right? I'm such a nutcase. I sit there and I try to figure these things out, and I look at the anatomy and I go, oh, shit, it's birthday cake. So your skin, right, comes in many layers, which is why we call it the birthday suit. Actually, it's not, but I think it seems like it should be. Right? So it's many layers. The top layer is your epidermis. Epi is on top of course. The next layer down is the dermis. That's actually your skin. Your dermis is where all like the real stuff is. It's your blood vessels, it's your nerve system, it's your fibroblasts, it's your collagen, it's your hyaluronic acid. In between there, it's a very important junction. I call this the frosting. The dermal epidermal junction, right? And it sort of vacillates. It looks like an egg crate. When you are young, it has a lot of surface area because it has a lot of vacillations, and as you get older, it sort of flattens out, and that means that the ability of things to pass through the junction from the dermis to the epidermis or vice versa gets limited over time. Below your dermis is in your sub-Q fat layer and blah, 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 blah. But the dermis is really where it's at. So depending on how old you are to get stuff into your dermis, when you are young, it's fantastic, right? If you put stuff on your epidermis, it's going to soak through those things, assuming it's like fat soluble, etc. Gets through the vacillating dermal epidermal junction, gets through your dermis, and that's fantastic. And vice versa, right? Because you have a lot of surface area. As you get older, it's harder because as the surface area sort of flattens out, it's harder to get things from your skin to your body or from your body out to your skin. Right? So depending on how old you are, you sort of have to take different pronged approaches. But the skin is, of course, it's mostly, it's collagen, it's hyaluronic acid, it's moisture. And I want to say this because it just flippin' pisses me off. I walk around all the time and people are obsessed with drinking 27 gallons of water a day. And I just think it's the dumbest thing in the world. Right? Because
I totally agree.
Right? Like, why do people do this? So, like, I'm cleaning out my toxins. No, you're not. You're just peeing a lot. But to make yourself look more hydrated, water has to stick to something. And hyaluronic acid is naturally made in our bodies. Unfortunately, we also have hyaluronic acid enzymes that break it down. Of course, as you get older, you break it down faster than you can make it. So we're all technically hyaluronic acid deficient as we get older, which means any areas of the body that need to retain fluid don't, right? So, your skin is the biggest example. If you take hyaluronic acid, it gets to your fibroblasts. The actual acid doesn't go to any place and sit there. It just doesn't really happen. But what it does do is it goes to your fibroblasts, it activates your fibroblasts, it's a signaling factor, you make more hyaluronic acid, and then it does actually sit there. And one molecule of hyaluronic acid, I mean, granted they're big, but one molecule of hyaluronic acid can stick to up to 6,000 molecules of water. So it's a sponge. So you want to look hydrated, you need your hyaluronic acid. Otherwise, the water comes into your body, it looks around for something to stick to, there's nothing there, and you just pee it out. And this is true anywhere the fluid is, right? Your eyeballs, your disc spaces, your joints, anything that is fluid-based needs hyaluronic acid to retain the fluid.
You know what? I love that, because that's probably the most perfect way we can end this, with something that people all over can connect with. They're walking around with gallon jugs of water and they got to finish it off. And I'm thinking, you know, first of all, check your pee, because if it's bright colored, you're actually overhydrating. I mean, if it's clear, excuse me. But anyway, that, you know, hey, Terry, can we have her back for like a third round one of these days? Oh, come on, man.
She's boring, she says strange things, she's insulting. No.
She's waiting for one of us to go into a seizure from all those big words that she was throwing out at us. That,
you know, she's the only one I know that can shut you up. So I'm like, yeah, you can bring her back. And then she speaks my language with blah blah blah. So we're both good.
I like the acronyms like PUFA. You know, like, I wonder what people are thinking about PUFA. What are it's not a sex toy. It's polyunsaturated fatty acids. All right. So we gotta close it up, man, because I mean, I probably have another 5-10 questions to ask, but we'll save it.
All right.
We'll save it for part 3.
Sandra, if we have you back for part 3, I don't think we've had anybody back for a part 3, but you
wow.
have enough stuff in that brain of yours that probably can do a part 4 too.
You know what would be kind of cool is when she opens up her clinic, we should just record.
Oh, that'd be fun. That's a good idea. That's a great idea.
That would be, while we're doing IVs, we could just all sit and hang out.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
All right.
I will personally put all these in the 2 of you. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. Oh,
and then,
wait a minute. Then I have to be nice to you then, because you can stab me.
Wahaha. Oh, darn, did I miss? Oops.
Oh, fantastic.
All right. Well, you're fantastic, and
great stuff.
And you know what? On that note, thank you so much for always bringing love and joy and lots of wisdom.
My pleasure, gentlemen. It is always a pleasure. You guys are awesome.
Thanks. Okay, hang on.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Crackin Backs podcast. We hope you enjoyed, and make sure you follow our Instagram at Crackin Backs podcast. Catch new episodes every Monday. See you next time.